6, 7, 8 lines down. Amar Rabbi Messanya. I don't mean to kick you out, sorry. All right, Messanya. Messanya said, oh no, I'm not there, sorry, I showed in a different place, right. I have to start earlier. Rabbi Yochanan, no, where you are, where I showed you, the top line, because it really goes into there. Rabbi Yochanan Masrin, Rabbi Yochanan says, I looked just for where I had my mark from last week. Rabbi Yochanan Masrin al, it should be kol kadei prisha. You have a Nazir sitting in a cemetery. Okay, a Nazir sitting in a cemetery. Now he took his oath of Nazirus in the cemetery. That's critical because there's going to be a very big machlokes between Bavli and Yerushalmi. The Bavli holds when he takes his oath of Nazirus in the cemetery, the Nazirus really only takes effect after he leaves the cemetery completely. It takes place partially in the cemetery, but completely after he leaves the cemetery. According to Rabbi Yochanan and the Yerushalmi, the Nazirus takes place completely as while he's in the cemetery. However, completely, he's really total Nazir. Okay, we'll discuss that. But however, he doesn't start counting days of Nazirus until he leaves. The clock doesn't start ticking until he leaves. Okay, that'll be critical later on, not right now so much.
What about his tumor?
So Rabbi Yochanan says, that's exactly what we're discussing now. Yochanan, Masino, Kokte, Prisha, for every segment of time he's there, that he could have left, let's say it takes him 5 minutes to leave the cemetery. So for every 5 minutes, he gets flogged another time if we warn him. If every 5 minutes we say, you gotta leave. He doesn't leave, so he gets flogged. Okay? He doesn't get a new flogging until he leaves the cemetery and comes back. But as long as he's in the cemetery continuously, he doesn't get it. There are no separate floggings. Amrei Barabba said, this is how Rabbi Yochanan responded to Rabbi Eliezer. Haksiv doesn't say, Lo yavo v'lo yitama. He should not come, and he won't become tummy. So meaning that only by actual entry does he become tummy, not by remaining there. By remaining there, the assumption is he does become tummy. Marlo, Rabbi Yochanan said, no. That's not what it means. Of course, by remaining there, he becomes tummy. Rather, it means Shim Hitzru Bo Mishum V'lo Yavo Loke. It doesn't matter why they warn him. If they warn him, don't come, he gets flogged. Mishum Lo Yitame. And if you warn him because of Lo Yitame, take out the next word. Eino Loke, he gets malchus as well. In other words, no matter what the warning is for, he gets flogged regardless. Rabbi Hila said, how does Rabbi Yochanan know his perspective that even by being passive and remaining there, and gets flogged for every segment of time where he remains there? Because the Tzira Taman, we learned over there by somebody who's in the Beis HaMikdash, and he's tummy, he's impure. So we learned over there, Hishtachave. If a person bowed down, he lost already? Yeah. Oh, fine. Hishtachave, if a person bowed down in the Beis HaMikdash when he was tummy, or he remained in the Beis HaMikdash the amount of time which it takes to bow down, right? Shah, third line. The main amount of time it takes to bow down. Amar, Omar is on his new line ready. So for there we learn out that even passive remaining in the Beis HaMikdash is enough to make you chayiv, to make you liable, and you're to pass remaining in the cemetery, as long as they warn you to leave, is enough to make you liable. Amar Rabbi Matanya said, Havinan Savri Meiri, we thought, Mapli, what's the machlokas? The makas, in terms of flogging. Carbon low, but not in terms of carbonos. In other words, that you don't have to bring a carbon tumor, you don't have to bring a nausea doesn't have to bring the carbon which he normally brings for becoming tame, for being in the cemetery, for being in the cemetery, continue to be in the cemetery. So he says, for that which Rabbi Hila said, we learn out from bowing down, and bowing down the Beis HaMikdash, or remaining the segments of time of bowing down the Beis HaMikdash, generates more karbanos. If you did it b'shogi, you don't intentionally. For each segment of time you're there, you bring another korban for having defiled the Beis Hamikdash. So actually, he wants to say, which is a shocking concept. I don't know if it's actually it's true. I didn't look it up, but he wants to say that by Nazir, the more times the Nazir remains there, the more korbanos tumah he has to bring. I know exactly how that works because I always thought the korban tumah of Nazir is something which you bring at the end of becoming tumah, to start from scratch. But it sounds like there are more korbanos tumah which a person brings for each additional amount of time which is there. I don't know how to explain it, but that's what he seems to say. Okay?
So the shita that you don't bring a korban when you go out of the cemetery.
Yeah.
So how does that go with what we find? Because you're supposed to bring a korban when you go to the mikveh.
We're going to get there. On Amud Beis. We're going to discuss it. Okay, so it says Masisa Pliga Al. Now, I'm going to change a bunch of your souls here. One word in each of several lines. But the reason why I'm going to do that is because later on in the Masechta, the Mishnah which we're quoting, and in order to ask questions, clearly the Shai Teres Yisrael makes this argument. Clearly, does not sustain the questions which are asked here in the Gemara itself. So let me read it and explain. Masisa Pliga Al Rabbi Yochanan says here. The Mishnah later in the Masechta argues Rabbi Yochanan, but it clearly doesn't. It clearly argues in Rabbi Elazar. So the Shai Teres Yisrael changes it to Rabbi Elazar. How so? It says in Nazir Shoyse Yain Kol Yom. It says Nazir drank wine all day. Eino Chayav El Achas. He's only liable to one flogging, despite the fact that he drank and he drank and he drank. But there,
He got warnings every few minutes.
oh, so that's how it sounds like the most question is over here. On question Rabbi Yochanan, it sounds like even he got warnings every few minutes, he only gets flogged once. So that'd be a question of Rabbi Yochanan. But it says explicitly, the Shai Teres Yisrael points out, it says explicitly in that Mishnah, in the next line it says that they told him don't drink, he gets malchus on each and every time. So that clearly is not a raya against Rabbi Yochanan, it's a raya for Rabbi Yochanan. So that's why he changes the gear. So he says, Nazir to questions from the next line in that mission, which is not quoted here, as is very often the case in Yerushalmi. That's question Rabbi Elazar. So according to Rabbi Elazar, how can you get flogged in each and every warning? He's passive. So Rabbi Elazar would explain that Pater law, he would explain that. Here it says B'Shein, but again, according to Shai Teres Yisrael, it should say B'Shohaya Beis Bli Apanoi. It's about where his throat was empty. So as he swallowed, stop, swallowed, stop, swallowed, stop. Even if he's not actually, manipulating the bottle, he's just opening his mouth and closing his mouth. If he's gulping, so then each gulp is a separate ma'isa. If he was like a funnel and they just poured, then your talk would be what mice said. Even if they warned you and warned you and warned you again, you'd only get one flogging. It's about a case where he was sculpted in the middle.
So it's like a behelamachas.
Right. It's like, it is behelamachas. Right. Well, that's what separates it. Right.
Gulping would be.
Right. It separates it. So, now, Masnisa Pliga, Rabbi Elazar. I just want to, I'm getting nervous that maybe he can't find his way in. I mean, you assume it's coming back. Let me just check the back. Okay, Masisa Pliga Rabbi Elazar. Now, again, I'm changing gears. It says here, Masisa Pliga Rabbi Yochanan. I'm changing it to Rabbi Elazar. And it's from the end of that mission over there. It says, Hoyam Metami Lameis. If he's coming Tomei for somebody, for a mace, Nazir is continuously becoming Tomei, Kolayom the entire day. Eino Chayav El Achas. He's only liable one korban. He only brings one korban. Period. Now, again, that would seem to be a question on Rabbi Yochanan, because it's constantly becoming more and more Tomei. So the thing is, again, here it says at the end of the Mishnah there itself, later on Perek Vav Alach, it says, Armale al tatame vumetame chayav kol echad. It says explicitly that yes, if we do tell him each and every time, stop touching the mace, he has to get flogged each time he touches the mace, as he's continuously holding on to the mace. So it's actually a question on Rabbi Elazar, and that's how Shai Teres Yisrael changes the girsa. Masisa Pliga Rabbi Elazar, and except that they warn him. So how does it try it? How is Rabbi Elazar going to answer the question? So Apostle here it's going to have to say, and again we change the gears, not b'shoen, not that he tarries, but rather sheporesh v'chozer poresh. He takes his finger up, puts his finger on, takes his finger up, puts his finger on. He goes out of the room, comes back in, and that's how he's liable on each and every pre-shot. Who like it? Okay, Masisa Rabbi Yochanan. Now the next Mishataka is Rabbi Yochanan, as it stated here explicitly. Kohen it says a Kohen is standing in the cemetery. A Kohen, it's the same parameters of Nazir. Now it become tummy, right? Kohen should be showing basic first. He's standing in the cemetery. Well, Shitalo Mason, they extended to him a dead body. Mesacher, another dead body. He's on a dead body because he's in the cemetery, and they extended him another dead body, right? Yochel Yikabel, is he allowed to receive the dead body? He's tummy anyway, right? So what difference does it make? It says that even though a Baal who's allowed to be in the cemetery because his wife died, he can't be to tummy in his nation, but you can't become more tummy, right? Once you're tummy, you can't become more tummy. It's interesting because that really is why Kohanim can't become tummy nowadays. Even though they're already tummy, all Kohanim are tummy already, but they're not allowed to bring additional tumah upon themselves. Okay, they're not allowed to bring additional tumah. So Hareshi Kibel Yochel Yachayv. On the other hand, what if he does touch another mace? Does he get flogged for it? No, he doesn't get flogged. Talmud Lomer, because it says lahechalo, to defile him. Eshu mosif chilo chilo. It's got to be something which defiles him. Yotza zeh, as opposed to this case, obviously, shena mosif chilo chilo. He's already defiled because he's standing in the cemetery, right? So it's not defiling him any further. So when you get flogged, it's prohibited to touch the second body. But you only get flogged if the second body adds to your desecration. Right, defiles you further. And here you're not going to get any further defile. So it's a prohibition, a lot, but not one which generates malchus.
And what if the Kohen is with the cemetery not for his wife, just stop, and then he touches the second body?
What?
The Kohen was, the supposition here is that the Kohen was in the cemetery.
I don't think it makes a difference.
Why?
I'm not sure. The next line maybe alludes to that, but I'm not sure exactly. I don't think it makes a difference. But look at the next line. Rabbi Zira said, it says here, Rabbi Yochanan leichol yotzes asher mosif chilo chilo, but that we just learned already. So therefore the Korbanei changes that. It says, it should say here, K'sha'emet al kever aviv, you're standing on your father's grave. Shlo yoel yomar, you shouldn't say hovi meisi al abo, once I was permitted to become tummy to my father's grave, elkot atzomos plenty biyadi, let me go and collect somebody else's bones in my hand. So you're right, it only speaks about a case where he was permitted to do so. I don't know what the halacha is. I don't know if there's a chiluk between this case and the case where he wasn't permitted. It would seem there would be, but I don't know enough about it to make any educated guess on it. Okay, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I didn't think about it. Okay, says Gemara lecholo. It says you shouldn't defile. A Kohen should not defile himself. B'shas misa, at the time of death. Rabbi Omer, you have a similar pasuk. Rabbi says by a Nazir. It says b'moison, at the time of death. So Shimon Shamar machlokas beineim. So it seems that there's no machlokas between them. It's just a difference in draw. It's a different psukim darshan in the same way. Shmuel says no. There's a substantive machlokas between them. Machlokas b'neim. V'aser Shimon barva. Shimon Lakish and the following myself, the Shimon Lakish is like Shimon Lakish. What's the difference between the two of them? So it's interesting the way though it's not explicit in the Gemara, the Korbanei and Moshe explained, Machlokas is whether a Kohen may be present at the time that a person is expiring, but not yet expired. The person's a goses. So if you hold that it's if you hold like like Rabbanan Leichalo, it's at the time, B'shas Misa, means at the time that the person is dying, it's already prohibited. Remer Afa Mosar, here it says, no, it's been Mosar, means when they're already dead. And Rabbi Shimon Lakish held like Rabbanan. Rabbi Shimon Barva held like Rabbanan. How so? Shimon Barva Midamach, when he was dying, it was when he was a goses, Havamer said, this vessel take out of my room because it's going to become tummy when I die. This vessel take out of the room because it's going to become tummy, actually because it's becoming tummy now. So it's becoming tummy now, so that means he held that he was a goses, he was dying, and that a dying person already is matami things. I don't remember such a sheet in the Bavli, but that's what it says here, that according, if you hold that you go after the pasuk of leichalo, that means even a dying person's already defiling stuff.
I would just think that you want to give enough lead time for the
right, that would be the Pashut shot, but that clearly is not the way the Hitzlanim shot over here.
Well, they have some hospitals.
It's all about Kalim. It's not about the Kohanim here.
And Israel is.
Yeah, they have double doors.
Double doors, I know.
Yeah.
But isn't there some warnings?
Is that warning sign? Could be.
I
have been in the hospital.
But
like a light or something? Could be.
An announcement or
could be.
what do you call that?
Okay. It says more further. Yotzav Nichnas. Now, what if the Nazir went out and came back into the cemetery? Rabbi Tarfon exempts him because he's a Nazir Tomei to begin with. Rabbi Kiva says he's Chayav. Actually, not talking about a Nazir, not talking about a Kohen. A Kohen who became Tomei. He came back in, right? Well, how'd you get in? Oh, back door's open? Oh, front door open. Okay, fine. Here are the.
Oh, thank you very much.
There's one extra one. One of them must be a Koheles paper. There's only be 4 there. So one of them is a Koheles. Okay, the rest of the 4.
Which Koheles?
This is last 2 weeks. It's a master. Don't lose it.
I still have your first cast.
Yeah. No, don't pull it up. They won't know what it was. I have written on there what it is.
This one, but not this one.
Yeah, it's written on both.
Oh.
But were you afraid of recording over it? Okay, so in any event, so says the Gemara, Yotzav Nichlas, a Kohen who's Tomei, leaves the base forest and comes back in. Retirement says already Tomei. What are you going to flog him for? Kima Chayev, but Kima says you're Chayev. He's still Matamei more. Retirement says Chimausif Sechilul, and he gets flogged. Chimausif Sechilul, what additional desecration was he desecrated? Kiva said, when he was in the cemetery, he's Tamei Tuma Shiva, the Tuma of coming in direct contact with the dead body. Now, of course he is. That's not the issue. Of course he's Tamei Tuma Shiva. Means if somebody touched him, let's say this guy, he was Tamei in the basic course, if somebody touched him, then they would be Matame for 7 days. Because he's connected to the mace, like transfers through him, right? If, however, he leaves the basic forest, the moment he leaves the basic forest, if somebody else touches him, they're only tummy till nightfall. When he goes back in the forest, he has capacity to be matame something again for 7 days. So if that's the case, so therefore he says, therefore he says that when he goes back, the Kohen goes back to the cemetery after having left, he once more becomes more Tomei again for the moments he's in the cemetery. That's mostly chilulo, and therefore he's chayev, right? Pirish Tomei to Maser v'yotzav nichlas Tomei to Mashiva. Omar Tarvato said, Akiva, Kol Parish Michok, Parish Michayov. Anybody leaves you, it separates from you. It's a play on the issue here, because the issue is when you're connected to the kever, so you're matami for 7 days, right? So he's saying, just like if somebody's connected to the kever is matami more, so to anybody that's connected to you is more alive. Anybody that's separate from you, it's like separated from life itself. Rav Amar. Now the Gemara gets hard. Rav says, but it's Kishmak. Rav Amar. Now this is going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if you take a look back in the Mishnah, in Halacha Hey, the beginning of Halacha Hey, the Mishnah says, you don't have to look back, I'll tell you what it says. But it said somebody who becomes a Nazir in a cemetery. So his Nazirus takes effect. However, he doesn't start counting until he leaves the cemetery. Now what if he goes out and goes back in? So it counts. That makes no sense, the Gemara says. What does it mean he goes out and comes back in, it counts? So it says, Rav Amar, it's two separate things. Rav says, Yotza Monin Nazirus Betara. When you come out, that's when you start counting your Nazirus for the next 30 days. Now, even though you're still tummy, you start counting your Nazirus then for 30 days.
That doesn't make sense.
What?
That doesn't make sense. We've learned until now you got to be Torah to start counting.
Okay, very good question. We'll see. Says Gemara, Nichnas, when he goes back in again, however, B'shvi Shelo, if he goes back on the 7th day, now what does it mean on his 7th day? It means he kept now 7 days of Paraduma. And then he goes back on his 7th day into the Beis HaKvaros. Then he has to bring Korban Tumah. No, it's for taking the Nazirus upon himself of the Beis HaKvaros. He doesn't have to bring Korban Tumah. For the first 7 days, if he enters the Beis HaKvaros, he doesn't have to bring a Korban Tumah either, though he'll have to start counting from scratch. When he's bringing Korban Tumah, only if he went back into the Beis HaKvaros after the 7th day was over. It was already fully Torah, then he went back, he has to bring a Korban Tumah. Okay? Bobayom from that day on. Rabbi Lezer says, Omer lo bobayom. Not on the same day, it has to be on the next day. Now we have a fundamental principle, which we have not seen before. The fundamental principle is that it says, Vayamim harishonim yiplu ki tamei nizro. Another tamei, his first days fall, because he became tamei. His Nazirus was tamei. Now, for this we learn you need Yomim harishonim. If a person became tamei from the onset of his Nazirus, or he was not Nazir, he became a Nazir when he was tamei, there's no Yomim harishonim to fall off. Need the Yom Rishonim Yiplu in order to be chayiv in a Korban Tumah. So therefore, this guy who took upon himself Nazirus in the cemetery, and then became Tomei any time before the 7th day, so he never had Yomim Rishonim, so he cannot bring a Korban Tumah. When's the first time he has Yomim Rishonim? After the 7th day, after he completed the Paraduma process, because now he already is Torah.
That's assuming the clock doesn't start ticking until after.
Right. That's right. Because you need Yom Rishonim of Tara.
Didn't we say that the clock starts tipping?
But still, Yom Rishonim of Tara, you don't have.
Right.
You need Yom Rishonim of Tara to fall. So even if the clock starts ticking the moment he leaves the cemetery, it's not Yom Rishonim of Tara which would fall if he entered the that's what you need to fall in order to bring Korban Tumah. But it's two separate things. The clock, the meter, the Briskerov says, right, there's the Nazirus, and there's the minion of the Nazirus. They're two separate things. So therefore the Nazirus might start when he's in the Beis HaKvaros. The clock always starts when he leaves the Beis HaKvaros. And the clock might be stopped by his becoming Tomei again. But the Korban which comes from the Nazirus Tumah is only for the Nazirus Tumah which came after days of Tahara. Okay, so that's why the two things are not necessarily related. Again, these things can vary separately. The issues of the Nazirus versus the issues of the count.
And then he has to restart the clock again.
He has to restart the clock. Right. Okay, says the Gemara. Kana Boykun Rebbe, the Kuri Rav. Kana asked in front of Rav the question you asked me before. How can you start the clock immediately after leaving the cemetery? It's got to become Torah, which takes 7 days first, right? They said, Torah charas lepoirish min hakever Torah. The Torah calls a person who leaves the cemetery, even though he has to become Torah, it calls him already Torah. Because again, he goes up a notch in Torah. Because while he's in the cemetery, anybody who touches him comes Torah for 7 days. When he leaves, anybody who touches him, he comes Torah till nightfall. So he went up a notch already. Okay? That's why it's called Torah. Where is this? Achrei Torah so Shivasrim Yisrael. It says, after his Torah, it's actually in Yechezkel, 7 days is count for him. So it means after his Torah means after he separates from the mace. It's already called a shtikal Torah. So that's why the clock can start after he leaves the Beis HaKvaros. He doesn't have to wait actually till after going 7 days. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says, the same idea, the same machlokes we just had, between Rav and Rabbi Elazar, now Shmuel instead. Shmuel says, Amar Yotza v'hiza v'shana v'toval, if he went out and he went through the 7 days, and he went to the mikveh again on the 7th day, Nichlas Bobiyom, he went into the basic course again a day, maybe two more Bobiyom. He raised Korban Tumah on that day, because he started raising the Nazir's Torah. Whereas my Lo Bobiyom, it's not that day, but rather next day. Why? Because it needs Yomim Rishonim. Yomim Rishonim means how many days? 2. So you need the 7th day, part of the 7th day, and part of the 8th day. Only then is it Yomim Rishonim. That then you would, first 2 days, that then you could bring a Korban Nazir's Tumah afterwards. Okay? Says more, Ula by Shmuel Amaru, Shmuel said, Matzri Cholei ben Nazir Tomei. This is only talking about a Nazir Tomei. It's because it says, Vayamira Rishonim Yiplu, Ki Tomei Nizro. Because he was a Nazir Tomei. That's where he's a third vasa. So when he Yomim Rishonim, only when he started out being a Nazir Tomei. Right. Things we don't pass like him. We don't pass like him. The only Yom Rishonim by Nazir Tomei. However, Matzul Leben Nazir Torah, Nazir Torah, after Rabbi Lezer Modeh, or even Rabbi Lezer agrees that he brings the Korban Tumah right off scratch, right from the get-go. I feel even though it doesn't have days to knock off. So it means Hayom Rishon Yiplu only goes on in Nazir Tomei. He's got to have 2 days of Tara. He took his Naziris in the Beis HaKvaros. In order to bring a Korban Tumah, he has to have at least 2 days of Tara pass over him before he starts bringing a Korban. But according to by Nazir Tar, if he took a neder to be a Nazir and a moment later become Tomei, even though there's no Yomim Rishonim, he has to bring a Korban. That's what he holds. Okay? That's Rabbi Hushit. This is Ula Bar Shmuel, right? Shmuel Arba argues. Shmuel Arba holds that by Yom Echol Nazirus, he says you need 2 days no matter what. The shaila is, even by Nazir Torah, even though it's not explicit, but he does argue. Trust me on this. I spent long hours agonizing over this today. That's what he passed me, by the way. That's how I know it. Because Rambam, Perek Vav, Vilchos Nazir is passing. They need Yom Rishonim both by a Nazir Tomei and by a Nazir Torah. No matter what. Okay? Now, Shmuel Rabbi Yom Echol Nazirus of Yom Echol Nazirus Beno. He kept 1 day for his own Nazirus. And 1 day for Nazirus he took upon himself to commence when his kid was born. In the previous parak that a person takes the Nazirus upon himself, says he wants to take the Nazirus upon himself when his kid is born, and then he takes a separate Nazirus upon himself until his kid is born. So then, the moment his kid is born, he forsakes his own Nazirus and transfers to the Nazirus of his kid. Okay? So now, what if there's such a case? He has 2 separate Nazirus. Day number 1 was his own, then his kid was born, day number 2 is for his son. Is that considered to be Yomim Rishonim, or do we need both days from the same Nazirus in order to be Yomim Rishonim? Because there's 2 days of Nazirus, but not 2 of the same, the 2 days of the same Nazirus. Okay? Maushit Starful. Manakayon. Go ahead, tell you about Imishla Beno Hayom Umacha Nichnas. We'll tell you about today his son was born, and tomorrow he entered the Beis HaKvaros. Hareish Nazirus Beno Shnei Yomim. There are 2 days for his son's Nazirus, today and tomorrow. V'Yishla Beno, let's say his son is born tomorrow. V'Nichnas tomorrow, and he enters the Beis HaKvaros tomorrow. Hareish Nazirus Shnei Yomim. He has Mikzah Sayom, he has part days for 2 days of his own Nazirus. So what's the query here? Mother said the Potter resolved that the query is when the kid was born Bein Hashmoshos. So kids born Bein Hashmoshos, you only have 1 day of each. Okay? So therefore, what's the status then? Rav Ivan said, Afilu Tamar b'chatzi hayom. You know what? The same question applies if the kid is born halfway through the day. Fascinating Gemara. He says, Locate Savin Meimer, wouldn't you say in that case, Tchilas hayom oilolo? The beginning of the day counts for him. Sof hayom oiliv. No, the end of the day counts for his kid. Now, he's obviously, you don't need Yomim Rishonim necessarily literally. You need to have 2 Nazirus. It's either Yomim or Rishonim, not both. You can have either Yomim, which is 2 days, or Rishonim, 2 Nazirus. And then if you have Rishonim, 2 Nazirus, which fall, because you were Nazir part of the day for yourself, and Nazir part of the day for your kid, and then you got Tomei, so that's already could be enough that you bring Korban Nazir Tomei. Okay? It says, Rabbi Yosef says, this whole Shaila is by Nazir Tohar. Only by Nazir Tohar. However, by Nazir Tomei, but by Nazir who's Tomei to begin with, Pshito Leishem and it's obvious that they join together. Now, it's a very strange thing. He says the whole Shaila really threw me for a loop today. Very, very strange. He says this whole Shaila is only by the whole Shaila, whether the Nazir is keeping on his own behalf, as is keeping on because of the birth of his son. The whole Shaila they join together is only by Nazirus, which began B'Tahara. But it began B'Tumah, then for sure the Nazirus of his son and his Nazirus join together. Very strange. Why should it for sure join together in that case? So I have to give you a little bit of background to what I think is going on here. It took me a long time to actually make Heder Tov, and I don't know if I have a shot anyway. But he says the Brisker Rav brings down, actually a lot of people, but Baz also brings it down later on. It's the Machlokas Rambam and Taisus. The Machlokas Rambam and Taisus says when the Nazir became Tamei, when and there is no Yomim Rishonim, right? One second, let me make sure this right. In the case where Nazir became case where Nazir became Tamei before he had Yom Rishonim, only 1 day. So according to the Rambam, he has to bring a Korban Tumah. He has to bring a Korban Tumah because he became Tamei. But he doesn't lose his count. Meaning he doesn't have to start from scratch. So anytime after day 2, he has to go back to day 1. But if it's before day 2, he gets to keep whatever days he counted. And he just brings the Korban Tumah at the end. The thing is that according to or brings the Korban Tumah, then he continues on from where he was, which is he got 1 day. The thing is, according to the Taisus, no, there's no Korban Tumah if you came Tamei in the first 2 days. There's only a Korban Tumah if you came Tamei after the first 2 days. So now you not lose your count, but you don't bring a Korban Tumah unless the Yomim Rishonim. So very fundamental machlokas, according to the Rashi and Rambam and Taisus, according to the Rambam, there's Korban Tumah anytime Nazir becomes Tamei, even though there's no Yomim Rishonim, even though there were no 2 preceding days. According to the Taisus, there's only Korban Tumah if there was Yomim Rishonim. If there was no Yom Rishonim B'Tara, there's no Korban. So the Brisker Rav explains the machlokas. He says that the Taisus obviously holds, as long as he didn't count 2 days in the base, two Torah days, you're like a Nazir in the base Hakfaros. We said a Nazir in a cemetery is a Nazir, but he doesn't mean a Korban Tumah, right? Because his Nazirus never started with Tara that he should have broken it and brought a Korban Tumah. So Taisus holds Nazirus is not really launched until you get 2 days into Nazirus. So there is no Korban Tumah to be brought until you're 2 days at least into your Nazirus, right? But the Rambam holds no. There's a chiluk, like the Brisker Rav has said previously, that there's a difference between Yomim and Nazirus, between the count and the actual Nazirus. So the Rambam holds before 2 days are over, you don't lose your count. You don't have to start from scratch. But your Nazirus, became Tomei. So that what's still intact, unless you had Yom Rishonim, is the count. Yom Rishonim has to do with the days you have to keep, and you don't lose your count if you became Tomei within the first 2 days. But what you do lose is you have to be in Korban Tumah regardless, because the Korban Tumah is not associated with the count, but rather is associated with the Nazirus you have to keep. So that's what the Brisker Rav explains Malchokas the Rambam and Tosfos. So the Brisker Rav says it's more understandable, though he makes the word according to the Rambam too, because it's more understandable the Gemara's question according to Tosfos. According to Tosfos, he says that here we have a case of Nazirus So and Nazirus Beno. There's for sure Nazirus, but there isn't days, right? The question is that enough where there was definite Nazirus, even though there weren't enough days, that's considered to be enough to bring Karbanos when he becomes Tomei? Or do we need not just that there was a Nazirus, but there should be days of a specific Nazirus in order to bring a Korban? Okay? In other words, again, according to Tosfos, the question Yerushalmi is asking is, what are the criteria for a Korban Tumah? As a Korban Tumah, you need specifically 2 days of Nazirus. But it doesn't matter what Nazirus. It can be 1 day for your own Nazirus and 1 day for somebody else's Nazirus. Or in order to be a Korban Tumah, do I need to have not just days of being a Nazir that became Tomei, but I need to be able to latch the Korban Tumah to a specific Nazirus which was defiled. Again, if you look at him as Nazir, the Nazir became defiled. If you look at him as a person who's undergoing a Nazirus period, then neither period really started yet. So then, how would he bring a Korban Tumah for Nazirus period which didn't start? You see what I'm saying? The Gabra Cheptza thing. You look at the Gabra was a Nazir for 2 days. You look at the Cheptza of the Nazirus, neither of the Nazirus was in play yet for 2 days. So when Tosfos says you need 2 days in Nazirus in order to bring a Korban, in order to consider the Nazirus launched to bring a Korban, is it that you need 2 days of being a Nazir, or need 2 days of the Nazirus in order to bring a Korban?
It's a generic Nazir, if you want to be Mitzaref them.
Right. Okay?
Specific.
Right. You following so far how we learn it according to Tosfos? According to Rambam, he learns it differently, but let's assume the Yerushalmi is going like the Tosfos, the Rayas that the Rambam doesn't hold like the Yerushalmi. But we've spoken about in the past, the Rambam holds mixed the Siyom Kekulo, the Yerushalmi doesn't. There are other Rayas as well, but for now, not for now. We'll get back to it perhaps later. But now I can explain to you, based on that the assumption that's going like Tosfos, although I can make it work like the Rambam too with a little bit of a splash on it. But now I can make the Gemara very good. When the Gemara says it's pashut that he was a Nazir Tomei, that in that case, his Nazirus and the Nazirus of his kid are mitzdarif. Why is that? But what's the Nazirus? Nazir Tomei and Nazir Tar. But like the Brisker Rav's Ha'ara, I have a very simple pshat. In order that it should be pashut, we need to have both a cheptza and a gavra. It's only a question if we have one without the other. But if we have both, then it's not a question, right? Because then you have both criteria. The Shayla Gemara is we have one criteria. He was a Nazir for 2 days. The Gavra was a Nazir. But you don't have the Chefza, right? Because each Nazirus wasn't launched for 2 days. So that's our Shayla. But a guy who became a Nazir in the Beis HaKvaros, it's true he didn't count for 2 days. That Nazirus doesn't count. In other words, he doesn't count the days until he leaves, right? But he's a Nazir already in the Beis HaKvaros. He was a Nazir in the Beis HaKvaros already. So this individual, for whatever Nazirus he was keeping, right? In other words, yes, you didn't start counting the 30 days until he left the Beis HaKvaros. But this Nazirus was already launched. Now, it's very important to know, we didn't learn that today, but Rabbi Yochanan says, and the Bavli argues on this, the Rabbi Yochanan says that if you gave the guy in the Nazir Beis HaKvaros, he took on his oath the Beis HaKvaros. If you gave Masra, he gets Malchus on his, if he comes Tamei, if he drinks wine, what's the third thing a Nazir gets Malchus for? Or cuts his hair. The Bavli says he only gets even according to Rabbi Yochanan, Bavli says he only gets malchus on tumah, on becoming not having left the cemetery, but not on cutting his hair nor on drinking wine. Why? Because the way the Yerushalmi Nazir, and where the Rambam Paskins, his Nazirus is there, but doesn't fully complete until he leaves the Beis HaKvaros. And that's why he only becomes chayiv if he takes a haircut or drinks wine after leaving the Beis HaKvaros. But according to Rabbi Yochanan Yerushalmi, his Nazirus begins in the cemetery. So look it. Now he was in the cemetery for whatever days he was, right? And he was tummy for whatever days, at least 7 days. Even after he leaves the cemetery, he's still tummy for 7 days, right? But he's Nazirus, but let's just say he was in the cemetery for some length of time. Self-started. He had at least 2 days of that, right? And if you're going to say, well, there weren't 2 days of Tara. As a Nazir, he wasn't the Nazir. No, he did. He had 2 days of Tara too. Because he kept 2 days after he left the cemetery. So in that case, he's got both elements. No matter what Mimanavshach. Again, in the case of a Nazir Tohar, he has one element. He was a Nazir for 2 days. Right? But neither Nazirus was properly launched because neither of the Nazirus was for 2 days. But if he was in the Beis HaKvaros and then came out and kept 2 days, one of Tara, one for himself and one for his kid, the Nazirus of himself already started in the Beis HaKvaros, and that had 2 days already. Yes, it's true that he still has to keep another 30 days when he comes out, but he started that Nazirus for his son, for himself, assuming that his son was born in the middle of the Ben Hashmashos, between day 1 and day 2. So therefore, Mimanavshach, he's got the criteria criteria with the 2 days of Nazirus, one of himself, one of his son. Again, one more time. If the Nazirus, we're in a case where he started out from scratch as a Nazir Tohar, and he's only got 2 days, and one of them was for himself and one of them for his son's Nazirus, so then in that case, it's true he was a Nazir for 2 days, but neither of the Nazirus was 2 days long, and that's our Shaila. We have the Gabra, we don't have the Chetza. But where he was a Nazir already in the cemetery for himself, and then he came out, and besides that was 1 day for himself outside the cemetery, 1 day for his son outside the cemetery. So then we have both criteria. He was a Nazir for 2 days, b'tahara, right? We had Yom Rishonim of Tahara, and also each Nazirus, at least one Nazirus for himself, was longer than 2 days, because he kept it already from before the time he came out of the cemetery. To what extent did he keep it? That he would have been flogged had he transgressed any of the Averos of a Nazir in the Beis HaKvaros. There's one thing I want to throw in besides that, which Ridbaz says, which will become important later in the Masechta. I don't think it's important here, but the Ridbaz makes a big deal out of it. He says, entering a cemetery is not one of the tumos for which a Nazir breaks his Nazirus. He only breaks his Nazirus if he's actually comes in contact with a dead body. But becoming Tomei in the bed, taking the Nazirus on the Beis HaKvaros is a deficit which causes all sorts of problems with the count. Therefore, one could say it makes the Yerushalmi a little bit more palatable. How is he a Nazir in the Beis HaKvaros? Even though Beis HaKvaros damages the Nazirus, it doesn't completely break his Nazirus. So therefore, in that case, since he was a Nazir in the Beis HaKvaros, and he then came out and kept 2 days b'tara, one for himself, continuing when he kept in Beis HaKvaros, and one for his kids, so you have both elements, the Gavra and the Chepza, to make him chayav b'korban tumah. Okay? So that's what Yerushalmi says. Let's see it inside now. Where's the Shiloh by a Nazir's Tor? There's 5 lines to the bottom of this Gemara. A Nazir Tomei, but a Nazir is Tomei, Pshita Leishem Mitzdarfin, since he began the Beis HaKvaros, it's obvious that they joined together. Now, Rabbi Mona didn't understand the logic. Rabbi Yisrael, so we're talking about. Lo Koshkein was not a Kabachomer. Umay Yomer Shein only Lobin Zirusov, Lobin Zirus Beno. The days he was in the Beis HaKvaros, they don't count! Because when he gets out, he's got to keep another 30 days. Whatever days Beis HaKvaros, let's say he was living in cemetery for 15 days, right? So yeah, it's 15 days, but he has to keep another 30 days when he comes out, right? So, if those days don't count, right? You say they join together. And therefore, the 2 days afterwards, one for his own Nazirus, one for his kids' Nazirus, they'll join together, right? After mitzdarfin, those 2 days join together. The day of his Nazirus, the day of his kids Nazirus. Yom she'eno limit the Nazirus Sov and Nazirus Beno. The days which Yom Shehenolim, sorry, the days which do count for the Nazirus Sov and Nazirus Beno, where it's these 2 days which count in and of them themselves. Eno din she'it star was not a kavachom, they're joined together. In other words, if you're saying that that the case where he was preceded by days which are meaningless, when his Nazirus cannot take effect, that causes Nazirus So and Nazirus Beno to be joined together and to make it Yom Rishonim. So you have no such problem that they should join together. I want to add on a little bit of explanation to that. We've said, remember, even he leaves the cemetery and it's still tummy, his Nazirus begins, right? So you're going to say that those days count, right? So Kavachomer, the days when he's totally tar, should count as Yom Rishonim, even if one's for his own Nazirus, one's for his kids' Nazirus. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi said, no. Tamon, or by a Nazir tar, Eino Roi Lekabel Hasroya. There's nothing for him to be Makabel Hasroan prior to obviously his becoming a Nazir. There's nothing there. He's starting from scratch when he begins his when he begins his Nazirus, right? Baram but here by Nazir Tomei in the Beis HaKforos, he's royal Makabel Asra. Again, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's capable of being Makabel Asra in the Beis HaKforos. In the Beis HaKforos, he's already able to be warned and get malchus on all elements of being a Nazir, even though he's a Nazir Tomei. So I'd say you misunderstand. Say the mila of it being a Nazir Tomei in the Beis HaKforos is that you have elements of Nazirus already. So therefore, since he had elements of Nazirus already, so therefore those days, plus the one day he kept Betara after he came out of the Beis HaKforos, plus the other day he kept for his kid afterwards, fulfill all the criteria. He's got a Nazirus which began, and he's a Nazir Torah Nazir Betara for 2 days. But a guy who had no days beforehand, he started from scratch, right? And he, in that case, we don't have 2 days. We have 2 days in which he was a Nazir, but no Nazirus, which itself was launched for 2 days. That's why it's a Shiloh. We don't know what the pasuk is in that case. Okay? Okay? So that's Rabbi Boom Boy, Barchia Boy. Rabbi Boom Barchia asked the question. Kamad Tamar Tamon Ad Rabbi Lezer, B'tchila, just like you say, Rabbi Lezer initially, you got to have 2 days, Yom Rishonim. Ubasof, at the end of the days, do you also need that? Or is it even though you don't have at the end? Because it says you need Yomim Rishonim, right? So do we also need, at the end, Yomim Achronim? Right? I don't know if it says in the pasuk actually Yomim Achronim. I don't think so. Let's say Yomim Achronim in the pasuk. I'm not sure if those words ever appear, but the assumption is it's questions like this, and I think that's why there's a question. In other words, we see from the pasuk you need Yomim Rishonim. What about Yomim Achronim? In other words, if the guy becomes tummy on the last day of his Nazirus, he doesn't have Yomim Achronim anymore, right? So you have, just like you need to be 2 days in Nazirus, you have to have 2 days left in Nazirus in order that you should break in Nazirus. Or even on the last day do you break in Nazirus? That's the question. So we need Yom Rishonim in order that to be considered to break. Going to this again, to bring a korban tumah. Is that true at the end? Or at the end you don't need Yom Achronim? Even if he comes to me at the last moment on the last day, he has to bring a korban tumah. That's the Gemara Shiloh. Okay? So says the Gemara. No, my Bezir Kumi Raimona, resistant from Raimona, the Lomas Disa is explicit Mishnah. Need by Yom Echad so is there Shloshim. If he comes tummy on the 30th day, so on the 101st day, he breaks 30 days. Rabbi Lezer Omer lo so sere lo shiva. It says he only breaks 7 days. But according to Tanakama, what do we see explicitly? We see that even if it's the 101st day, meaning his Nazirus is really over already. He's only waiting to bring his korbanos. He hasn't yet brought his korbanos. It was a Nazir, the guy was a Nazir for 100 days. And as the 101st day before he became Tomei, he broke his Nazir. Before he brought his korbanos, he broke his Nazirus, right? So it says, he breaks it. We're going to Tanakama, says 30 days. So you see that you don't need Yom Machronim, because it's even after the last day, and he breaks his Nazirus. Says the Gemara, that's not a raya. Here I see that he breaks the Nazirus, yes, but not fully. Shamanu shemevi korban tumah. Do you see he brings the korban? My question is, when he breaks the Nazirus after 30 days, when he breaks the Nazirus on the last day, or here even after the last day, does he bring a korban tumah or not? Here you just show me that he has to keep an additional 30 days, but my shiloh is about the korban tumah what he has to bring. And on that you have no raya. I don't know what the answer is. So he says, now this is very mashma like Tosfos. Again, not like the Rambam. Because the Rambam, if you recall, says that you need Yom Rishonim, that even if you don't have Yom Rishonim, then you still bring a korban tumah. It's only if you don't have Yom Rishonim, then you don't break the count. In other words, whatever one day you count, it counts, and then you count only another 29 days. But korban tumah you bring regardless. So this Gemara is the antithesis of that. That's why I think the Rambam doesn't pass like the Yerushalmi. Because here it's the Yerushalmi says, fakert. It says it's easier to break the count than it is to bring the korban tumah. Because it says here that the guy who comes Tomei on the Yom Achron, there I see he breaks his count, he's got to keep another 30 days. But I don't see that he has to bring a korban tumah. My shiloh is by a korban tumah. Whether bring korban tumah, you need Yomim Achronim or not. And that I don't know. So it seems like, just like by Yomim Achronim he had a suffix, right? Whether you bring korban tumah or not. That means by Yomim Rishonim, he definitely felt that korban tumah you only bring if there's Yom Rishonim. Do you see how it's not like the Rambam? The Rambam says that even if you don't have Yom Rishonim, you bring a korban tumah, no matter what. It's just a question of the count, because the Rambam, according to Brisker Rav, separates between the Zirus and Minyan. But here you see it's not like that. Here you say the Yerushalmi's query about Yom Achronim was, I know there's stira, but do I need Yom Achronim to bring a korban tumah? And the obvious inference of that is that in order to bring a korban tumah, I do need Yomim Rishonim. Do I also need Yomim Achronim? So clearly infers, not like the Rambam, that Yomim Rishonim are necessary in order to bring a korban tumah. If you don't got 2 days of Torah at the beginning, you can't bring a korban tumah. So it comes out according to the Brisker Rav, that the Yerushalmi holds that Nazirus and Minyan are inseparable. Right? You have to have Minyan in order to bring korban tumah. And therefore you need to have Yomim Rishonim. And it's just possible, like the Yerushalmi said before, that you can join together, you have the Nazirus Betuma, whatever Nazirus kept in the Beis HaKvaros, with the Nazirus kept outside the Beis HaKvaros to constitute Yomim Rishonim. But Lamaisa, you need to have days and plus Nazirus in order to constitute Yom Rishonim and in order to bring korban tumah once they break. But according to the Rambam, right? That's according to the Rambam. That's according to the Tosfos, right? You need both. But according to, you need Yom Rishonim in order to bring a korban tumah, means Nazirus and Minyan are inseparable. But according to the Rambam, they're two separate planes. They float separately. But you can break your Nazirus and have to bring a korban, but not break your count. And that's why the count continues, transcends the korban. And vice versa. You might be able to break your count and sometimes, and nevertheless, not bring a korban tumah. And that's the case the speaker, the verse Rav spoke about, where you have where you have a guy who kept 30 days and became tummy on the last day, and they has to keep another 7 days, according to Rabbi Lezer, that there he doesn't bring a korban tumah. He only has to count another 7 days, because your count is a problem, but your korban is not a problem. So according to Rambam, the count of days and the tumah and the Nazirus itself float independently. According to Tosfos, they're linked together. Now, the Briskerov doesn't make this connection, and I know it's confusing, but I want to say it anyway for posterity, which is that I think the Rambam holds Miktas Hayom Kikulo by Nazirus. The Yerushalmi doesn't hold Miktas Hayom Kikulo by Nazirus. There's no such thing. I explained several sugyas previously, which you'll hear on the tape in the beginning of the third parak. So I'm thinking that it's because the Yerushalmi holds like Tosfos, that the days are inseparable from the Nazirus, right? Days and Nazirus are inseparable. The Babli holds, no. Could be the Babli holds like the Rambam. And so the Rambam is like the Babli. Miktasayim Kekulo, meaning that there are two, you can have the Nazirus independent of its days, right? And therefore you can have Miktasayim Kekulo. You don't necessarily need complete days in order to constitute Nazirus. But the Yerushalmi holds that days and Nazirus are inseparable. And therefore the Yerushalmi holds you don't say Miktas Yom Kikula when it comes to Nazirus. I think that there might be a linkage there. It's just talking off the top of my head, but I think that there's such a parameter. Okay, the rest of the Gemara takes 5 minutes. Mishnah and Nazirus Merubah. Okay, some of you are up to Halacha Vav next Mishnah. Mishnah and Nazirus Merubah. Some of you took upon himself a big Nazirus. Hisham is Naziruso. Let's say he took upon himself the case of the Gemara will give, Mishnah will give us the case. Hisham is Naziruso. He completes this v'char ba'aretz and then get there to Yisrael. Beishamrim Nazir Shloshim has got to keep 30 days of Nazirus. Because Chutz La'aretz is Tamei. And so it's got to keep it another 30 days. Beisomrim Nazir B'tchila has got to start from scratch, for example. Ma'aseh b'leinei Malka, Ma'aseh with Eleni, the queen. Sheholach b'noam melchama, her son went to war. B'hamra, and she said, he comes home whole, and he Nazir Sheva Shanim, want to be a Nazir for 7 years. His son came from war whole, for his Nazir Sheva Shanim. So Sheva Shanim, almost there, she came up there to Yisrael. For Ruah Beis Hillel, Shetei Nazir Od Sheva Shanim Acheros. Because the Naziris and Chutz La'aretz doesn't count. It's very Zionistic Mishnah, right? So Sheva Shanim. At the end of the 7 years, the last day probably, Nitnes, Shem Tomei. Name says Nazira, Esrim V'achas Shana. It's very difficult to fit all that hair under her shaitel. So she was Nazir for 21 years. Amar Avida says, Loisa Nazira Labasur Shana. It's only 14, not 21.
Why didn't you just have another 30 days? Why 7 years?
What?
Why didn't you just have 30 days after she was tummy for 7?
That's why you're right. Maybe she obviously didn't become tummy on the last. She become tummy sometime towards the end of the 7 years. Because the only thing I guess 30 days if it's after the Malos. That's obviously before the end of the Malos. So it's like almost 21 years. In what Rabbi Yehuda was saying. That Rabbi Yehuda says like Beis Shammai, meaning that therefore it's only 14 years because it was 7 years, and then she became Tamei, which came to Eretz also just before she finished it, and therefore she kept another 7 years. But if we're going to Eretz Yisrael, only keep another 30 days. The other one said, "Everyone holds no. It holds like Beis Hillel. It's just that she didn't become Tamei. He disputes the facts of the case." So now the Gemara asks, if you're going to say Beis Hillel is like Beis Shammai, the Tay Shloshim Yom Yudal Shana, so she actually 14 years and 30 days, because 4 to 7 years, 7 years for the Tumah, and then another 30 days because she came Tamei, right? So why is it 30 days? So give me a break, says the Gemara. We don't mention a 30-day month in terms of 14 years. That pales by comparison. Okay, now we won't finish the parak now. We'll just go a little bit further to say we did 2 blocks. So if 2 groups of witnesses testify about the guy, these guys testify he kept himself 2 Nazirus. He said about himself 5. Beishamai says the machlokes between the Edom. They got Nazirus is the Safek Lahakel. And this doesn't have to keep Nazirus as well, because the Edom contradict each other. Beisomim no, yesh bichlal chamesh time. 5 includes 2. She had Nazir time. He should be Nazir twice. He's a Nazir twice, 2 out of the 5. Because on those first 2, they're not contradicting each other, right? If I say 2, you say 5, so on 2 we agree. It's the other 3 which are the issue. So there's got to be a Nazir for 2 out of the 5. Okay, Rav Amar b'koil nechlaku. Rav says the machlokes is b'koilo. If one guy said it was 2, and the other guy said it was 5. One set of witnesses to 2, and the other set of witnesses said 5. But what if one set of witnesses said he said 1 Naziris, 2 Naziris. And the other set of witnesses said, no, he said 1 Naziris, 2 Naziris, 3 Naziris, 4 Naziris, 5 Naziris. That's Porei. He counted them, right? So then, Porei kol ha'mamoide sheish b'chlal chamisha shtayim. Then everybody agrees, even Beishamai, that 5 includes 2. She had Nazir shtayim. There should be Nazir 2 out of 5. So where they clash because they enumerated the greater sum, but not if they specified. Rabbi Yochanan b'moinech says no. The other says even where each one says he counted, just say he counted 2, and the other says he counted 5. There too is machlokes. But if he includes all of them together, everybody agrees that there's a machlokes between the Eidim, and in Beis Hillel concedes a kan Naziris, no Naziris at all. Hey dino kol, hey dino mono. What's kolo? What's including? What's specifying? Koilel is a hain. It's like the guy says kokos a hain on my time. This guy says 2. These guys say 2. The other guys say 5. Moine is a hain on my chad. The one said when this said he said 1, 2. The other says he also said class arba chamesh. He said 3, 4, 5 as well. That's the difference between koil and moine. Rav Amar, now based on this machlokes, now we can outline these principles. Rav Amar hekesh edus b'soch edus. When there's a contradiction of testimony within testimony, lo batla edus. Now, it's part of the testimony agrees, even though it's part of a larger testimony which disagrees. So we don't cancel the testimony. We say 2 out of 5 still exists. Okay, no matter, even though in the larger sense there's a machlokes, but nonetheless it's in the on that subset there's no machlokes, so it says no contradiction. No, if there's a clash of testimony within testimony, meaning even though part they agree, but they clash the rest, and it's a general testimony, but later the edus cancels. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees if the clash came after the testimony, it's not a question, not an issue. But let's say I say the Gemara is going to give an example later on. Let's say we both say that Reuven killed Shimon, but I say after Reuven killed Shimon he went north, and you say after Reuven killed Shimon he went south. So then that doesn't bother us because that akosha is an event which took place after the germane event under discussion. Okay, that's acharedus. Okay, I might be able to give an example of his own opinion. The Maribechia Barbechia B'Sher Yochanan Huchzak Memuna Zeh Oime Minakis Huchzak Memuna Zer Minakis. If he was known to have counted, it's not talking about the Nazir, it's talking about money. Zer Minakis. When this guy said he could count it from the key. Now here it's 2 separate 80. One aid says he counted from the wallet. Zermi Natzor he counted from a money belt. It has to do with a loan. The circumstances of a loan. So, this is a contradiction of witnesses within the testimony of Rab Moedish Batla Edus. Rab also agrees that here the testimony is canceled, right? Because why is that? Because here you need to join the 2 of them together, and you can't. Because each witness has a different story. However, Mapli, what's the machlokas? Where there are 2 sets of witnesses. These say counted from the wallet, the other say counted from wallet belt. Hekish besoch edus batla edus. They contradict each other and we cancel them. Ukurav lo batla edus. According to Rav, it's not canceled. Why is that? Because they're 2 separate groups which are not contradicting internally, and ultimately they both testify to a loan. Just one says the circumstances are A, one says the circumstances are B. So therefore we don't cancel them. Okay? We say that whatever they're in agreement, we can accept the two of them. Where it's two witnesses, we have to combine. Their stories must be identical, otherwise they don't combine to be a set. But we have two sets against each other, and part of their testimony can be reconciled. Let's say they say it's for a money belt. They say it's, well, for everybody agrees it's $100. So then the amount on what we can reconcile them, according to Rav, we take them. Yochanan says we don't reconcile even part of them. We just throw them both out of court.
How about the Nefashos?
Coming up on the Nefashos. Says the Gemara, this guy says he killed him with a stick. This guy says he killed him with a sword. Now there's one-on-one, two separate people. This is contradictory. Of Rab Moshe Balays can't join together. What's when the two groups, one says a stick, the group says a stick, the other group says with a sword. It's contradiction. According to Rav, this is not cancelled. Now, Elu during Ludoran Pana, one says, group says after the murder he turned to the south. Velu min Tzom Pana, the other say after the murder he turned to the north. Everybody agrees. If it's within the edus, it's not. It doesn't cancel it. It cancels it. But this is after the edus, and therefore it does not cancel it. Okay. More goes on, but it's late. We'll stop here. But tomorrow we'll see how they resolve the continuation of this issue.
This is in the Bavli also?
No, it's not in the Bavli. It's not in the Bavli, but we had in Yerushalmi Avomis. We had it recently in Yerushalmi.
Oh, that's what that's
okay. I would not have remembered that, but it says here on the side, it says in the Pnei Moshe was also in the Avomis.